The film begins with a voiceover of Nick Carraway telling a doctor that his father always told him to see the good in others. But he's seen true good only in Gatsby, who was the most hopeful man that he's ever met. Then it was shown that Nick was getting treatment in a psychiatric facility for alcoholism and insomnia. His voiceover explains how he was disgusted by everyone and everything except this Gatsby guy, as his memory takes him to 1920 in New York. He rented a cottage 20 miles from Long Island, surrounded by mansions of the newly rich. He once wanted to be a writer, but at the time he abandoned that dream and he started to work on himself to become a Wall Street bondbroker. Across the bay from Nick's cottage was Daisy Buchanan, who is married to the British and very wealthy former athlete Tom Buchanan, and they live in another mansion. Daisy is Nick's cousin, and he has dinner with her and Tom and their friend Jordan Baker, a professional golfer. Daisy plays matchmaker between Nick and Jordan, and when Jordan tells Nick that he must know Gatsby, Daisy was sad and shocked by the mention of his name. Later in the middle of dinner, Tom keeps on getting phone calls, and Daisy's friend Jordan explains to Nick that she suspects the call is from a woman with whom Tom is having an affair with, and everyone in town is talking about the affair. Nick and Daisy take a walk after dinner, and she tells him how unhappy and cynical she is about everything. When he asks her about her daughter, she tells him that she wishes her to be a fool because she can only survive this world if she's a beautiful fool. When Nick goes home that night, he sees a figure in a gloom and he believes it's Gatsby staring at Buchanan across the harbor. Next morning, Tom invites Nick to go to the Yale Club with him, but they end up picking up Tom's mistress, Myrtle Wilson, and they go to an apartment that Tom keeps for Myrtle in Manhattan. Nick tells him that this really makes him uncomfortable since Daisy is his cousin, but Tom and the other girls at the party convince him to stay. And so they have a party, and Nick drinks for the second time in his life and enjoys himself. He then wakes up in his own porch but was unsure of how he got back. And then he receives an invitation to go to one of Gatsby's parties. At the party, Nick learns that he was the only one to have an invitation to the party. Everyone else just shows up every Saturday for the party. He was feeling lonely, then he runs into Jordan Baker, and with another man, they speculate about Gatsby's true identity, and they wonder why he was throwing all these lavish parties each week. Then when Nick was enjoying himself at the party with Jordan, a man comes and takes Jordan from Nick's arms, saying that rich girls don't marry poor guys. Then he encounters a man who claims to know him from the 3rd Division of the war. Nick starts talking about Gatsby, saying that he was sent an invitation from Gatsby and how he heard that Gatsby was a second cousin of the Kaiser. Then a man reveals himself as Gatsby and tells Nick to enjoy the party and leaves with Jordan. Gatsby's assistant asks to tell Jordan that Mr. Gatsby wants to speak to her in private. Later, Gatsby invites Nick to go to lunch with him in New York. The following day, as Gatsby and Nick drive toward the city, Gatsby tells Nick about his past and how he was born from a wealthy family in the Midwest, and all of them died now, leaving him huge sums of money. He was brought up in America, but educated himself in Oxford, and tells him that he was a war hero who received many medals and recognition from many authorities in the US. Nick doesn't quite believe that he's telling the truth, but Gatsby shows him photographs of his medals. He then introduces Nick to his business associate Meyer Wolfsheim, and they then go to a bar. Meyer appears to be involved in some shady business deals, and they then run into Tom, and when Nick introduces them, Gatsby got a little uncomfortable and he leaves without saying goodbye. Later, Nick meets Jordan for a drink, and she tells him that Gatsby and Daisy know each other and they were once in love before the war. Daisy waited so long for Gatsby after the war ended, but no one heard from him for some unknown reason. A year later, Tom wooed her with expensive gifts and much attention, and finally he stole away her heart. The morning of the wedding, Daisy got a letter which Jordan suspects was from Gatsby. She was devastated and very angry after reading the letter and was heartbroken as well. She burned the letter and never told anyone what the letter was about, and later that day, she ended up marrying Tom. When Jordan saw them on their honeymoon, they seemed to be in love with each other and they appeared to be the happiest couple on earth. Jordan then tells Nick that Gatsby bought the mansion just to be near Daisy, and he threw all those parties hoping one day Daisy would walk in. She says Gatsby was in love with Daisy now like he was 5 years ago, and she then tells him that Gatsby wanted to invite him and Daisy over for tea so they can be reunited. But he wanted Nick to make it appear as if though it was a coincidence. Nick was confused about what to do, and he debated with himself whether it was a good idea to reunite a married woman with her former lover. But he finally decides to go through with Gatsby's plan for the meetup, and when he tells him that, he was so happy that he offered him money. Nick says that he was doing him a favor and declined the money offer, and Gatsby was very nervous and he starts delivering many flowers to Nick's cottage, preparing it for the meetup. Wait, hold on. Did you subscribe to our channel? Come on guys, you're here, you're watching the video. Help us out by hitting the subscribe button, as it really helps out me and my team to make more videos for you guys. And now, let's get back to the recap. The following day, Nick arrives for Daisy and Gatsby to meet at his house, and when Daisy arrived and saw all the flowers, she was convinced that Nick was in love with her, but she then saw Gatsby. Nick then claims that he has some business in town and he leaves them alone. It was awkward at first, but they managed to get more and more comfortable with each other, and then he invites her and Nick to a mansion for a tour. At Gatsby's mansion, Daisy remembers her love for Gatsby, but she realizes the impossibility of their love. Nick then narrates that Gatsby told him the real story. He was born to a poor farming family, and his real name was James Gatz. He always believed in his heart that he was meant for greatness, and he left home and the farm when he was a teenager, and later he encountered a wealthy man named Dan Cody, whom he rescued from a storm. Then Cody and Gatsby sailed the world together for 5 years, and he became a mentor to Gatsby, and he taught him how to be a gentleman. After Cody died, leaving him a fortune, Gatsby was cheated out of his inheritance by Cody's family. And once again, Gatsby was poor. But by the midsummer, Gatsby was front page news as a millionaire, yet no one knew how he came up with the money. Gatsby throws another party, which Daisy, Tom, and Nick attend, and Tom was suspicious of Gatsby since no one knows where his money comes from. Gatsby then introduces Daisy to many famous people, and when he asks Tom if he could take Daisy to a dance with him, Tom agrees reluctantly. Gatsby and Daisy go off for a walk, and Daisy tells Gatsby that she wishes that they could run away together. But Gatsby argues that it won't be respectable, so she has to tell Tom that she never loved him, and then they may start their life together at the mansion. On their way back home, Tom tells Daisy that he's growing more suspicious of Gatsby's business dealings, and that he'll find out anything that there's to know about him. After the party was over, Gatsby runs into Nick, and he tells him how he hoped for Daisy to tell Tom that she never really loved him, so he'll marry her then and start over, but he tells him that she just wants to run away. He dreamed of a proper life with her after asking her father for her hand, but he was so infuriated with her for wanting to run away from everything, as all of his achievements were just for her. From then on, Gatsby stopped throwing those lavish parties, and Daisy visits Gatsby discreetly, and they started to have an affair. One day, Gatsby called Nick and told him that Daisy was ready to tell Tom, but she requested to have lunch at her home to tell Tom there. The following day, Nick, Daisy, Tom, Gatsby, and Jordan have lunch at Buchanan's estate. When Tom sees the spark between Daisy and Gatsby, he becomes infuriated and suggests that they should all go to the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan. They all stop for gas in the Valley of Ashes, and Myrtle sees Tom driving the yellow car, and her husband tells Tom that he's planning to move to the West, taking his wife with him. And Tom was very distraught by the thought of losing his wife and his mistress. Later at the plaza, Tom asks Gatsby prying questions about his past, claiming that he never went to Oxford, and embarrasses him in front of Daisy. Then Gatsby responds by telling him that his wife never loved him, and he asks Daisy to tell him that. And when Daisy starts telling Tom that she doesn't love him, he starts to remind her of the life that they had together. Daisy then gets confused, and she tells Gatsby that she once loved Tom too, but now she only has feelings for Gatsby. Tom provokes Gatsby and suggests that Gatsby will never fit in with the wealthy, and tells him that his money is illegal and not respectable. And when Tom starts talking about how he was not born into money, Gatsby loses his temper and becomes violently angry, nearly punching Tom, which horrifies Daisy, and she leaves crying. He runs after her and starts driving her home in his yellow car, and as they drive through the Valley of Ashes, Myrtle and her husband were having an argument, and he would slam her onto the window, and she escapes him and starts running out to the street. When Myrtle sees the yellow car, she runs out into the street and tries to stop the car, thinking that it was Tom driving. But the car hits her and she instantly dies. Then Daisy and Gatsby leave the scene without stopping, and Tom, Nick, and Jordan come up to the scene. Horrified to learn that Myrtle is dead, Tom tells her husband that it was Gatsby who killed Myrtle and encourages him to take revenge. Back at the Buchanan estate, Nick finds Gatsby sitting in the garden, and he becomes really violent with him for leaving Myrtle to die in the street, and he accidentally spills out that it was actually Daisy who was behind the wheels. When Nick tells him to go home and rest, he says that he'll wait and see if Tom will bother her about what happened in the plaza. When Nick spies on Daisy and Tom inside the house, he hears them planning to make some phone calls to the police and go away for a while. Nick does not reveal Daisy and Tom's plan, but advises Gatsby to leave the city as soon as possible. But Gatsby says that he'll wait for Daisy to calm her nerves, as he's sure that she will call him the following morning to make arrangements to run away together. While staying up all night waiting for Daisy to call, Gatsby tells him his life story about his humble beginnings, and how he met Daisy, and how he begged her to wait for him until he makes something of himself, and the letter she received on her wedding morning. After a while, Nick leaves Gatsby, and we see Nick at work, visibly distracted waiting for Gatsby to call with the news while Gatsby waited for Daisy's call. Meanwhile, we see Daisy looking on her phone as she debates whether to call Gatsby or not. Gatsby goes for a swim in his pool to kill some time while he waits for Daisy's call. The phone rings and Gatsby hears it, and he excitedly gets out of the pool to pick it up, but he doesn't see Myrtle's husband behind him, who shoots him in the back. He then falls into the pool dead, and we then see that it was Nick and not Daisy who was calling. Daisy had chosen to be with Tom, and she'd packed up her bags and had left with her husband and daughter. And Gatsby is blamed for the affair with Myrtle and her murder, and Nick wrote and called hundreds of men and women who enjoyed Gatsby's hospitality on his lavish parties, but not a single person came to his funeral. And Daisy hasn't sent even a single flower, and Nick was disgusted and leaves New York. We then see him put the final touches on a manuscript that he wrote Gatsby, which he retitles and calls The Great Gatsby. And this is how the movie comes to an end. I hope you guys enjoyed the recap. Make sure to leave me a like, leave me a comment, and most of all, subscribe to my channel. I love you guys so much, and I promise to see you on my next recap. Bye.